This morning I am preparing to give group meeting this week, and it's journal club week, which means that I am going to present a paper that I've read to the rest of my lab for discussion and kind of walk them through the various figures and my thoughts about it. And so let me back up a sec. So basically, by group meetings, what I mean is that every week all of the lab members, so we have the grad students, we don't have undergrads here, but if you did, they'd be here. The lab technicians, the postdocs, so those are people who have finished their PhD, but they're still doing additional research with more responsibilities and expectations and that sort of thing. And then there's associate researchers and that sort of thing. So there's a bunch of different positions that I talked about the people in the past. There's also our lab manager comes, and of course our PI, the boss of the lab, the primary or principal investigator. And so how it works differs from lab to lab, but basically every week, how it works in our lab is that every week we all get together and we start off with the lab biz. So that's lab business. So it's things like various supplies or equipment that's not working, or that we have something people turn off the gel imager light tray when you're done using it, and make sure you close the door of the freezer and that sort of thing. As well as these tips are back ordered till December. If we try these tips, which has been the common sort of lab biz recently, because there's crazy back orders, crazy. But actually, the biggest thing lately has been our insect cell expression media. So we've been trying different media, and so media is the growth food that you grow it in. But anyway, I'm getting off track. So basically, after the lab is the core of the meeting. And so it can be one of two things. One week it'll be journal club, where someone's discussing an article, which is what I'm doing on Wednesday. And then sometimes it'll be research. So somebody's presenting their research, that a progress report on the research. And it's really exciting to hear about all the different research that's going on in the lab, and in a way where you actually see the results. So we're often talking, so we know what's going on with other people's research in the lab, but not formally. And so it's an exciting way to do that. And it's also just it's nice to get together with everyone in the lab. It's kind of you can think of it kind of like your family dinner. So hopefully your lab feels kind of like a family, hopefully you have a positive lab environment. And so assuming you do, though, then it's this nice way to kind of get everyone together. And so for over a year, I think we were over Zoom, our group meetings, and so it was kind of depressing, and even when we were all working here in person, we were on Zoom, so it was really weird. But I think last month we had our first in-person lab meeting in a really long time, so it was really exciting. And so this is going to be my first time presenting in person again since we switched to Zoom. But so I'm up for journal club, and I'm really, really excited because in September my next research group meeting is actually going to be a practice for my thesis defense. So we talked about that before. So the thesis defense is your thesis, you have to write this long write-up of everything you did in your PhD, and then you submit that. It's also called a dissertation, and then you also have to give an oral presentation of it. And then so how we do it here is we have a public oral presentation that's an hour long, and then you have an hour plus of your committee members, so the people who are judging you and seeing is she worthy of getting that PhD? Has she done enough? Is everything solid or whatever? So they give you a grilling about your work and ask you a bunch of questions, and if all that goes well, then you get your PhD. And so my next research group meeting is going to be my thesis defense, my proposal defense or whatever, and so it's going to be really exciting. And it's also going to be great to get feedback from the lab members, so I can make adjustments and changes before my actual defense, which is October 5th. But anyway, Wednesday is journal club, and so for this week I'm doing this cool paper that I found, and So I'm going to show you how I found it, and also I'm not going to tell you too much about the paper itself, but I want to show you how I find it, and also some cool advice about getting help from unusual places, known as Twitter. Oh, and one last note. So I talked about how the research meetings can be really cool, but so can the journal club, because there's so much like literature, like papers out there, that it can be hard to keep track of. And so one of the nice things about journal club is that you can really dive deep into a paper, and you get to learn about various things based on the people in your labs, like various interests. So often what you'll try to do is like choose a paper that's somehow related to your work, or you think it'll be helpful, some new technique you're hoping to try or that you are trying, that the paper uses. And so that's the case with the paper I chose, and so it uses this technique called HDX-MS. So yeah, which I've been trying to analyze my own data on. And so yeah, so that's how I found the paper, as I will show you in this next part. Date with all of the papers coming out, and to find papers to do for journal club. And so I use a variety of tools, and one of them is this website called Meta. So I was actually one of the first person. I got a beta test Meta because I learned about it at this conference, and they gave me cool free socks and stuff, which was cool. But even cooler is this website, because it allows you to set up like feeds of various topics that you're interested in, and then it will give you it'll find all these articles from like all over and put them when they come out that refer to something in that topic, and then you can see them in these feeds and choose what you want to read. And so I have a feed for HDX-MS, which I'm not going to go into, but I've gone to in past posts, and it's this technique that I'm using to study how proteins, like conformational changes, so like shape changes and stuff. More on that in the other post if you're interested, but basically I have a feed on it, and I found this paper about it, and it sounded interesting. Go to the DOI. So the DOI is the Digital Object Identifier, I think, and it'll take you to basically the website for the paper. So this is on bioRxiv, so it's a preprint. So we talked before about preprints a bit, but basically in the traditional science publishing process, you send a paper to a journal, and it goes through this process of peer review where scientists in the field take a look at the paper, make sure that nothing's missing. If there's points they want clarified, they're often request that you do additional experiments. And so basically this paper hasn't been through peer review is all I want to say. So it's on this bioRxiv server, which is like the main server that we use in biochemistry, the main preprint server. So it's this cool paper, and you can read more about it. It's kind of technical things, and if you go to this tweets page, I know this sounds silly, but then what happens is that the authors will have done like a Twitter thread of it. So it's not just for preprints that this happens, but this just happened to be a preprint. And so there's this Twitter thread by the first author, so like the main author, Sean Costello. So he's a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley, and he did this tweet thread about the paper, which was really cool. And it was helpful, and I saw that he had answered someone's question, so I had a question too. And so I decided to ask my question, and he gave this like really great answer, and it really helped explain things, and he even offered to answer further questions in the future. And so I'm really grateful, and I've actually done this sort of thing before. I'm getting into touch with the scientist who actually wrote the paper when I'm preparing for journal club, and Twitter makes it really nice to do this in a less intimidating way, kind of, and it makes it really accessible. So I'm really grateful when scientists do these like sort of tweet tutorials on their papers, and then are so welcoming of questions. And with this Twitter, it's really nice. So sometimes in the past, I've like emailed people who've written the paper, and sometimes you never hear back. Sometimes you hear back, but it takes a while, and it's harder to have like a conversation, really. But when you do it with Twitter, then other people can chime in with their thoughts too. So it's this really great way to have a conversation Um, and so, in this time, I'm actually having a conversation before I'm going to have a conversation with my lab to discuss it during group meeting.